My name is Maya Thorne. This is my story. It is about the home I was promised, the brother who stole it, and the long, shadowed path I walked to take it back. The court called his theft legal. I called it war. This is how I served the justice the court denied. The last light of day bled through the tall courtroom windows. It painted the wood panels in shades of orange and despair. The sound of the judge's gavel was the sound of my world cracking. Case dismissed, the judge said, her voice final. The property known as Heritage Song Vineyard remains with Mr. Andrew Thorne. My older brother, Andrew, did not look at me. He simply adjusted the cuff of his silk suit. A tiny, victorious smile touched his lips. It was the same mouth that had once promised to protect his little sister. Now, it only smiled at my defeat. His lawyer patted his back. My lawyer, a gentle woman who had tried everything, just bowed her head. Heritage Song. The name was my first memory. It was my parents' life's work. It was my soul's home. And now, by the cold logic of law, it belonged to my brother. He had stolen it from me, and the court had just handed him the key. I don't remember walking out. I remember the granite steps of the courthouse, cold under my hands. I remember the echo of Andrew's laughter as he celebrated with his friends. I got into my old Jeep, the one filled with baskets from the harvest. My hands trembled so violently I could not fit the key into the ignition. The drive back to my rented city studio was a blur of hot, silent tears and a freezing rage. My parents, Eleanor and Robert Thorne, were not just farmers. They were poets of the earth. They built Heritage Song from 12 acres of stubborn, hilly soil and a vision that never faded. My mother's hands were always warm, her fingers stained with earth and grape juice. She could hear the health of a vine in the rustle of its leaves. My father's voice was a steady hum, like bees in the lavender. He believed the land spoke to those who listened. He said I was its best listener. "You have the heart for it, Maya," he would say, watching me gently train a new vine along its trellis. "Andrew, he sees the spreadsheet. But you see the story. You feel the soil." Andrew was 8 years older. He was sharp, ambitious, and saw the vineyard as a portfolio asset. He loved the profit it could generate, not the sunrise over its rows. He left for the financial towers of the city as soon as he could, chasing deals and status. Their death was a theft of air, a quiet plane engine failing over the mountains. The police officers at my door were so kind, and their words so brutal. The world became a silent, hollow place. In the numb shock of grief, Andrew took control. He was the efficient one. He managed the memorial. He handled the endless forms. He was so burdened, so responsible. One night, he came to the farmhouse with a folder. My eyes were raw from crying. I could barely string two thoughts together. "Just need your signature here, Maya," he said, his voice soft with a brotherly concern that felt like a blanket. He put an arm around my shoulders. "It's tedious legal stuff. Lets me keep everything running smoothly for Mom and Dad." To honor them, I was adrift. He was my big brother, the one who had scared away monsters under my bed. I trusted him, so I took the pen. I signed my name where he pointed. I did not read the dense paragraphs. I just wanted the world to make sense again. I had signed my birthright away. Those papers contained a clever, poisoned clause, a survivorship agreement. It stated that, upon our parents' passing, the vineyard passed solely to the eldest heir, Andrew. Our parents' true will, which left Heritage Song to both of us, with me as the reciting caretaker, was suddenly, conveniently, lost. Andrew said it must have been misplaced in the chaos. When the fog of grief lifted and I saw the truth, it was too late. I took him to court. But my memories were not evidence. The people who stood for me, our old vineyard manager Joseph, my mother's best friend Sharon, were dismissed as sentimental or biased. My story was an emotional plea. His documents were crisp, notarized, and perfect. The law loved his paper trail more than it loved my truth, so I stood in my sterile, city apartment. The court's final order was crumpled in my fist. I was 30 years old, but I felt a century of weariness. My hands, made for pruning and planting, were empty. The law had witnessed my brother's crime and called it business. But I knew the truth, and if the court would not give me justice, I would become justice. I would not just reclaim the vineyard. I would make Andrew surrender it. I would orchestrate his defeat in the spotlight of his own pride. This would not be a battle of tears. It would be a campaign of patience, intelligence, and flawless execution. Maya Thorne, the dreamer who loved the land, had to disappear. Someone harder, sharper, had to take her place. My first act was to vanish. I became a phantom. I sold everything that tied me to my old self: my Jeep, my library of gardening books, my mother's silver locket, the one she said held the green of the vines. Selling it broke a piece of my heart, but I let it break. I needed capital, and I needed to become stone. With the money, I retreated to the end of the earth, a fog-shrouded fishing village on the Oregon coast where the cliffs met a violent sea. The rain was constant. No one knew the name Thorne. I chose a new name from a ship's log in the local museum, Anna Shaw, a name that held no history, no pain. I spent the next 2 years constructing Anna Shaw from nothing. I needed knowledge. Vengeance is not an emotion. It is a discipline. I studied property law, not to use it, but to dismantle it. I read about behavioral psychology, about leverage, about the pressure points of arrogant men. I learned viticulture as a strategist. Blight vectors, soil pH, global supply chains, brand valuation. In the blue glow of my laptop, I learned the art of the ghost, how to find information, how to send whispers into the right ears, how to move unseen. Most crucially, I rebuilt my body and spirit. I ran on the rocky beaches until my legs gave way. I lifted fishing nets until my muscles burned. I forced myself to relive every betrayal. Andrew's pitying look, his patronizing pat on the head, the triumph in his eyes in the courtroom. I fed every tender memory of my brother into a cold, black furnace in my core. Day by day, it incinerated the soft woman I had been. What remained was flint and resolve. Maya was buried in the coastal mist. Anna was forged in salt and fury. When I looked in the mirror, I saw a stranger. My face was lean, my skin weathered. My hair was cut short and functional. But the eyes were the real change. They were calm, depthless pools that revealed nothing. I was ready. I returned not as Maya, but as Anna Shaw, a freelance agricultural consultant. I rented a room above a noisy garage in a town far from the vineyard. The room was small and smelled of motor oil and dust. It was a cocoon. From there, I began to listen. I needed to know what my brother had done to our home. The news was a series of fresh wounds, each one a confirmation of the man he had become. Andrew had streamlined operations. That was the word he used in the one interview I read. He had fired old Joseph, who had poured 50 years of his life into the soil. He gave Joseph a small severance and a handshake. He hired a consultant named Derek, whose only metric was cost per bottle. He was forcing higher yields with synthetic fertilizers, poisoning the delicate microbial life of the earth. He was blending our exquisite, small-batch wine with cheap bulk juice from a factory vineyard 100 miles south, selling our family's name on a lie. He was auctioning our legacy for quick cash to fund his expansion plans. He had taken the soul of heritage song and was turning it into a commodity. He had also become engaged. Her name was Chloe. From the few social media profiles I could access, she was all polished surfaces and ambition, an interior designer from the city. They lived in our parents' farmhouse, which she had reimagined. The warm, cluttered kitchen where my mother cooked, where the smell of baking bread used to mix with the scent of oak from the barrels, was now a cold gallery of stainless steel and white marble. It had no soul. It had a designer. I printed a picture of it from a magazine feature and pinned it to my wall. It was a picture of a tomb. I needed to see for myself. I needed to walk the land. Posing as a graduate student from a distant university researching sustainable practices in historic vineyards, I made an appointment. I wore glasses I didn't need and pulled my hair back. My voice was higher, lighter. I was Anna. Walking those rows was a physical agony. The land was weeping. The vines I remembered as robust and vibrant were stressed, their leaves pale and thin. The soil under my borrowed boots was compacted and lifeless, a far cry from the soft, fragrant loam of my childhood. In the heart of the vineyard, the original plot called Eliner's Promise, I found the new manager, Derek. He was a man in his 40s with a permanent frown. He saw my clipboard and assumed I was just another academic. "It's all about shortcuts now," he grumbled, not knowing he was talking to the true heir. "They want volume, not character. And that new irrigation project on the North Slope is a disaster waiting to happen. All that clay up there. But Mr. Thorne won't hear it. Says his engineers guaranteed it. Just wants it done before the investors tour next month. A project. I filed that away. After the tour, I drove to a public overlook that gave a view of the North Slope. Even from a distance, I could see the raw, brown scar of excavation. It looked wrong. I spent the next week in the county records office, pulling permits and soil surveys. Andrew had fast-tracked permits for a massive water catchment system. The engineering reports he submitted were from a firm known for rubber stamping projects. Independent surveys, buried in appendices, warned of unstable substrate. His construction was shoddy, the retaining walls clearly inadequate. A heavy winter rain could cause a catastrophic mudslide, wiping out not only his vines, but contaminating the entire valley's watershed. The environmental and legal fallout would be immense. It was a weapon, but a dirty one. Threatening the land itself was unthinkable. My revenge had to be precise, surgical. It had to target him alone, to make him choose to let the land go. I needed to enter his orbit, to understand his new world. I became a writer for Terroir Quarterly, a niche but respected publication. I crafted a convincing online portfolio for Anna Shaw. I requested an interview with the fiancée, Chloe, for a piece on the women behind wine empires. She was thrilled. Sitting in the sterile farmhouse was a surreal torture. Everything was white or glass or steel. There were no photographs of my parents. Over sparkling water in a faceted glass, Chloe gushed. Andrew is revolutionizing the wine world, she said. His legacy cuvée is a masterpiece, a true expression of modern luxury. And the partnership with Apex Global Ventures in Dubai, it's a game changer. The letter of intent will be signed at our Vineyard Gala. It's the social event of the season. Everyone will be there. Apex Global. My late-night research had tagged them as a ruthless conglomerate with a reputation for swallowing small brands whole. Andrew, in his hunger for validation and big city respect, was climbing into a tiger's cage. And the gala, his annual spectacle of success, where he played Lord of the Manor. It was the perfect theater for his ruin. A plan crystallized in my mind, cold and multifaceted. I would strike at the deal, the reputation, and the man, all at his zenith in front of his entire world. I would not attack from the outside with a hammer. I would become a virus within his own system and make him sick of the very thing he stole. The following weeks were a silent, meticulous ballet of manipulation. Every move was calculated, every risk assessed. I operated in a state of cold focus I had never known before. First, Apex Global. From an internet cafe 2 towns over, using an untraceable account, I contacted a notoriously meticulous financial blogger based in the UAE. He had a history of exposing Apex's strong-arm tactics. My message was brief and professional, posing as a disillusioned former associate of Andrew Thorne. I suggested, with careful language, that Thorne was over-leveraged and potentially overstating his vineyard's capacity and environmental compliance to secure the deal. I attached no proof. I simply pointed to concerning public soil survey data and permitting irregularities on county websites. I was not giving him a story. I was giving him a scent. For a firm like Apex, even a whiff of risk was a reason to renegotiate, to delay, to demand more concessions and deeper due diligence. I was placing a single grain of sand in the gears of his multi-million-dollar machine. Second, his reputation. Heritage Song was built on authenticity, on story, on the romantic myth of the family farm. He was destroying that story with every tank of chemical fertilizer. So, I would tell the real story. I created an elegant, anonymous blog called The Unbroken Vine. I bought the domain through several layers of privacy guards. I filled it with my parents' philosophy in their own words, from letters and journals I had saved. I posted my childhood photos of the land thriving, of my parents laughing among the vines. Then, with clinical precision, I began to document the changes. I posted redacted copies of chemical purchase orders I found in obscure agricultural compliance databases. I compared the old bottle design, with our family crest, to the new minimalist label that bore only the name Heritage Song in a generic font. I wrote about the silencing of the old staff, quoting unnamed sources who described the firing of Joseph and the atmosphere of fear. I never accused Andrew of theft. I never mentioned my name. I simply showed the before and after. I let the contrast scream for me. I sent the link to 5 people. a retired wine critic in Napa my father had respected, two owners of small, principled wine shops in New York and San Francisco, a food writer for a major newspaper with a focus on ethics, the editor of a popular online magazine about sustainable farming. I sent no message, just the link. The story was compelling enough on its own. It began slowly. The retired critic wrote a heartfelt personal essay about lost legacies. The wine shop owners started asking their distributors pointed questions about sourcing. Then, the food writer picked it up. Her column asked, "What are we really drinking?" It used heritage song as a central case study. Finally, a renowned and feared critic named Martin Croft, whose word could make or break a vintage, published a devastating piece. The title was "Has Heritage Song Forgotten Its Melody?" He wrote about the bland, homogeneous taste of the new blends, the rumors of chemical use, the stark contrast between the vineyard's marketed history and its current reality. The article was shared everywhere. The buzz in wine circles turned into a roar of disapproval. Andrew's perfect, shiny reputation, the one he cultivated so carefully in glossy magazines, developed a visible, spreading crack. I watched it happen from my dark room, feeling nothing but a cold sense of progress. Finally, I needed the one piece of evidence that could not be argued with, the truth that could topple his entire lie. The true will. Andrew was arrogant. He was proud of his cleverness. Would he have kept a digital copy of his victory? A secret trophy? His business systems were fortified, but Chloe's digital life was an open book of social media and online shopping. She was the weak link. I crafted a perfect, beautiful email. It appeared to come from a famous Milan fashion house. It invited her to an exclusive, password-protected virtual preview of their next season's collection. A virtual front row seat. For Chloe, it was an irresistible prize of status. She clicked the link. The link did not take her to a fashion show. It quietly installed a very small, very simple program on her tablet. This program did nothing but sit there, allowing me, from my laptop miles away, to see the files on her tablet. And because she was always logged into the home Wi-Fi, it gave me a shadowy entry point to the shared family computer drive they used for personal documents. For 3 nights, I explored their digital life. It felt like a profound violation, a descent into a sewer. Vacation photos in Bali, tax returns, guest lists for parties. Then, in a folder buried within another folder, labeled Archives Legal, I found it. A folder named Estate Planning Parents. My breath stopped in my chest. I clicked it open. There they were. PDF scans, perfectly clear. The last will and testament of Alina and Robert Thorne. I saw their familiar, looping signatures. My father's strong, decisive hand. My mother's elegant, flowing script. The language was simple and clear. It left heritage song Vineyard to both of their children, to be held in trust for our sons, Andrew and Maya Thorne, with the day-to-day stewardship granted to Maya, who shares our heart for the land. There was a video file. I played it with the sound off, then on. It was our old family lawyer, Mr. Wilkins, his kind, wrinkled face on screen. This video confirms the wishes of Alina and Robert, as detailed in the will dated June 12th, and my role as its executor, and then, the final, damning piece. A scan of the document I had signed in my grief. You could see where the original pages ended. And then, you could see the next page, the forged survivorship page, had been added later. The font was slightly different, a half-point smaller. The margins did not match up. The line spacing was off. It was a clumsy, obvious fake when you saw the two parts together. He hadn't even bothered to do a good job. He was that sure of himself. I downloaded everything. The will, the video, the forged document. I stored them in multiple encrypted locations. The digital proof of his crime was now mine. A cold, solid triumph settled in my stomach. This was no longer about emotion. It was about physics. I had the lever. I had the fulcrum. And at the gala, I would have the place to stand. The final piece was the deed. I drafted a quitclaim deed, a simple document where Andrew would give up all claim to the property. I found a notary public in a nearby city, a woman facing foreclosure. I offered her $5,000 in cash to be on standby on the night of the gala, to provide an immediate, legal electronic notarization the moment a signed document was sent to her. She asked no questions. Everything was set. I had become the spider, and the web was complete. The night of the Vineyard Gala was clear and still, the kind of autumn night that used to smell of wood smoke and fallen leaves. Now, as I stood in the shadow of the ancient oak tree my mother had planted, the air smelled only of imported flowers and the exhaust of idling limousines. The great barn was a jewel box of light and sound. Laughter and the clink of glasses spilled out into the darkness. I was not Maya. I was a server named Anna, in a stiff black uniform, my face partially obscured by a delicate silver mask that matched the evening's masquerade theme. The catering company had been desperate for staff. My forged references were impeccable. Walking into the barn was like walking into a dream where everything was slightly wrong. It was my home, but it was dressed as a stranger. My father's handmade harvest tables, scarred and stained with decades of good use, were gone. In their place were flimsy glass tables that reflected the light in brittle shards. The walls, once hung with my father's collection of antique pruning knives and sun-faded maps of the land, were now bare, painted a stark, soulless white. A vapid string quartet played in the corner, the music meant to be invisible. The air was thick with expensive perfume and ambition, and there he was, Andrew. He stood in the center of it all, a crystal glass of our wine in his hand, holding court. He looked like a magazine cover. His tuxedo was perfect. Chloe stood beside him in a silver dress that seemed to suck the light from the room. They accepted kisses on the cheek, handshakes, and praise. They were the king and queen of a kingdom of ash. Across the room, I saw my targets. Two men in impeccably tailored dark suits. They stood very still, observing the room with the calm, unreadable eyes of predators. The apex executives. On a small, beautifully lit table near them sat a single object, a leather-bound folder. The contract, the symbol of his ultimate validation. I moved through the crowd, a tray of champagne glasses heavy in my hands. The glasses held the Heritage Song Golden Reserve, the very wine I had helped blend 5 harvests ago. I heard the pieces of conversations as I passed, each one a nail in the coffin of my old life. Eris has truly transformed the place, a woman said. The Apex deal is a masterstroke, a man replied. Such a vision for the future. I smiled behind my mask, a thin, cold stretching of lips. The future was coming, but not the one they expected. I watched the clock. I knew the schedule from Chloe's own gushing interview. At 9:15, Andrew would make a speech. Then, he and the Apex men would move to the contract table for the signing ceremony, all smiles for the hired photographer. At 9 o'clock, I slipped away. I walked calmly to the small sound booth at the back of the barn, a closet really. The young technician was outside, flirting with one of the other servers. The door was unlocked. I stepped inside and closed the door softly. The space was cramped, filled with blinking lights and dials. My heart was a steady, slow drum in my chest. I connected a small device from my pocket to the main audio mixing board. I had gotten the system password from the technician weeks ago by buying him rounds of beer and pretending to be an audio student fascinated by live event tech. I opened a program on my phone, selected the audio file I had prepared, and set it to play at 9:14. A second command would switch the video feed from the scenic vineyard footage to the files stored on my phone's cloud drive. I set a 3-minute timer. Then I slipped the device off the board, wiped it clean, and pocketed it. I was out of the booth in 60 seconds, melting back into the stream of servers carrying trays of delicate desserts. At 9:14, Andrew tapped his glass with a spoon. The crowd quieted, turning to him with expectant smiles. My mouth was dry. "My dear friends," he began, his voice warm, practiced, confident. "Welcome to Heritage Song. Tonight is not just a celebration of the harvest, but a celebration of a new dream. A dream of growth, of excellence, of taking a beloved legacy into a glorious future." His voice cut off. The speakers emitted a soft, digital hum. Then a different voice filled the barn. It was a calm, neutral, synthetic voice. I had crafted it myself. "Before this new dream continues," the voice said, "the past has a right to be heard." Andrew froze, his smile stuck on his face like a poorly fitted mask. The crowd looked around, confused, thinking it was some strange audio-visual stunt. The large screens behind him, which had been showing slow-motion videos of grapes dripping with dew, flickered. New images appeared. First, the scan of my parents' true will. The document filled the screen, magnified so everyone could see the names Andrew and Maya Thorne. They could see my parents' signatures. A soft, confused murmur rippled through the guests. Then the screen split. On one side, the true will. On the other side, the document I had signed. A red circle, drawn by my editing software, highlighted where the real document ended. Then another red circle around the forged addendum. The digital voice spoke again, pointing out the mismatched font, the different spacing, the clumsy cut and paste job. It explained, in simple terms, what a survivorship deed was and how this one was fabricated. The murmur grew louder, tinged with shock. Andrew's face paled to the color of chalk. "What is this?" he shouted, his voice too high, cracking. "This is a malicious hack. Someone turn off the screens." Now, but it continued. The video of old Mr. Wilkins began to play. His kind, sad, authoritative voice filled the barn, explaining my parents' wishes in his own words. I saw several older guests, people who had known my parents, nod in grave recognition. Then the screens changed again. Now they showed the geological survey maps of the unstable North Slope. They showed the permits Andrew had fast-tracked. Then, next to them, my own photos. Photos of the shoddy, crumbling dirt walls of the excavation site. Photos of the cracked concrete and cheap rebar. Side-by-side comparisons of the soil health reports he submitted to Apex and the damning public reports that showed chemical saturation. Graphs illustrated the plunging quality metrics against rising profit projections. Finally, the screens displayed two sets of financial projections. One was the glossy, perfect report Andrew had given to Apex, promising exponential growth and pristine quality. Next to it, in stark, simple numbers and charts, was the reality. The falling bricks levels in the grapes, the soaring cost of chemical inputs to fight the soil degradation, the real, shrinking profit margin when the cost of potential environmental disaster was factored in. The digital voice said, "This is the truth of heritage song. A legacy stolen, a land endangered, a business built on lies." The silence that followed was complete and heavy, a physical thing pressing down on the room. Every eye was wide, every face turned toward Andrew. The two Apex men were no longer calm. They were statues of fury, their eyes locked on Andrew, their expressions turning to granite. Andrew looked like a cornered animal, his eyes darting wildly. His perfect world was collapsing in front of 200 of the most important people he knew. "Lies," he screamed, his composure completely gone. "These are all lies and forgeries. Digital sabotage, security. Find who is doing this, I will ruin them." This was my moment. While all eyes were on him, I walked quickly, unseen, down a side hallway stacked with empty kegs to the main power panel for the barn. I opened the metal door. With one sure, swift motion, I pulled down the main power lever. The barn was plunged into utter, profound darkness. For a second, there was no sound at all, as if the world had been swallowed. Then, gasps. A woman's short, startled scream. The clatter of a dropped glass shattering on the stone floor. Into that perfect black silence I spoke. I used my own voice. The voice he hadn't heard in years, lower now, steady and echoing in the vast, dark space. "No need for security, brother," I said. "I am already here." I clicked on the powerful tactical flashlight I carried. The bright, white beam cut through the darkness like a blade. I pointed it directly at Andrew's face, blinding him. He flinched, throwing a hand up over his eyes. "Who is that?" he yelled, panic stripping his voice of all its polished authority. "Look around you, Andrew," I said, my voice loud and clear, carrying to every corner. I swept the flashlight beams slowly across the crowd. The light caught frozen faces, shocked, fascinated, horrified. "Look at your partners from Apex. They now see the risk you tried to hide. Look at Martin Croft, the critic, standing by the pillar. He has the full dossier for his next column. Look at County Commissioner Hayes. She's freezing your permits as we speak." I brought the beam back to his face, holding him in its unforgiving light. "Your house of cards is falling. And I have all the proof. Not just what was on the screen, the original files, the scans from your own computer. Everything." He squinted, trying to see past the light to make out my shape in the darkness. His mouth worked silently for a moment. Then, a whisper that was somehow louder than his scream had been. "Maya?" The name was a gasp of disbelief, a curse, a realization of a nightmare made flesh. "You stole my home with legal fiction," I said, the beam unwavering. The court adored your fiction, so I wrote a better story, a story of fraud, a story of environmental negligence, a story ready to be sent to the district attorney, the EPA, the FBI's Financial Crimes Unit, and every major news desk in the country with one tap. I walked forward, the beam forcing him to step back. I placed my single sheet of paper, the quitclaim deed, and a heavy pen on the contract pedestal, right on top of his leather-bound dream. "You have a choice," I said. Choice 1, I press send. He held up my phone, the screen glowing with a single, large button. "You face criminal fraud charges. Civil suits from Apex for material misrepresentation. The total loss of everything you have. You will likely go to prison. Heritage Song will be seized and sold at auction for pennies to pay your debts." I paused, letting the terror of that future sink in, settle in the stomachs of everyone watching. I saw Chloe take 2 deliberate steps back from him, distancing herself, her hand to her throat. Choice 2, I continued, my voice dropping into a quieter, more dangerous register. "You sign this. You renounce all claim to Heritage Song Vineyard, its assets, its trademarks, its future. You walk out of this barn tonight. You never set foot on this land again. You never speak my name or the name of this place again. In exchange, the evidence remains with me, hidden. You keep your freedom. You keep whatever hollow city life you've built away from here. You disappear from my world." The silence was a physical weight, choking and absolute. Then, the lead Apex executive cleared his throat. He nodded to his colleague. "Our agreement is void, Mr. Thorne. Consider the letter of intent nullified. We will be pursuing all legal remedies for material misrepresentation and fraud." They turned in unison and walked straight for the barn door. Their polished shoes echoed on the stone floor. They did not look back. Their exit was a death sentence pronounced in front of everyone. Andrew looked around. He saw the faces of his friends, his investors, his peers. The admiration and envy were gone, replaced by pity, by disgust, by the hungry, avid look of people witnessing a spectacular scandal. He was utterly, completely alone. The king was naked, and his kingdom had turned to stare. A sound escaped him. It was not a word. It was the raw, guttural sound of a breaking man, a mix of a sob, a snarl, and a scream of pure rage, all choked into one helpless noise. He stumbled to the pedestal, his movements jerky. He grabbed the pen. He stared at the deed, at my name, Maya Thorne, already printed neatly on it. His whole body shook with tremors of fury and defeat. For a long, suspended moment, I thought he might rush at me, might tear the paper to shreds. But then, with a cry that was pure, unadulterated surrender, he bent and scrawled his name on the signature line. He pressed down so hard the nib tore through the paper. I stepped forward. I picked up the deed. From my pocket, I took out my phone. I opened the email I had pre-drafted to the notary, with the image of the signed deed already attached. I hit send. 10 seconds later, my phone chimed with a reply. A PDF. I opened it. There it was, the same deed, now bearing the official digital stamp and signature of a notary public of the state. It was dated, timed, and irrevocable. I held it up in the beam of the flashlight. "It is done." "Get out," I said, my voice flat, final, empty of everything. "You have 1 hour to take your personal things from the farmhouse. Then you leave my land. If you are here 1 minute past that, I will call the sheriff and have you arrested for trespassing. I will press every charge I have." I then turned the flashlight to illuminate the path to the main doors. I turned to the stunned, silent audience, a sea of wide eyes in the dark. "The evening is over," I announced. "Please go home." Quitclaim deed was, and no one argued. No one spoke a word. They moved like sleepwalkers, like ghosts, filing out of the dark barn, their expensive clothes rustling softly. They huddled in small, shocked groups as they moved toward their cars, every single one avoiding looking at Andrew. Within minutes, the barn was empty, save for the 2 of us, the overturned glasses, the ruins of the feast, and the ghost of our parents' dreams. I left him there, standing alone in the shrinking pool of my flashlight beam, surrounded by the ruins of the life he stole. I turned off the light, plunging him into total darkness, and walked out into the cool, clean night air of my vineyard. I did not look back. The legal transfer was swift and anticlimactic. My lawyer, the same kind woman, handled it with tears in her eyes and a fierce, vindicated pride. The signed and notarized ironclad document. A judge reviewed it, saw a clear and voluntary property transfer, and stamped the change of title. Just like that, Heritage Song was mine. Andrew's life unraveled with the speed of a detonated building. Apex Global's lawsuit for fraud arrived before he'd even finished packing his city apartment. The judgment was massive, designed to be punitive. It bankrupted his other ventures, his development projects, everything. Chloe left him before the ink was dry on the lawsuit papers. I heard through the fragmented grapevine of mutual acquaintances that he moved to a small, anonymous city in the Midwest, living off what little he had managed to shield. He became a ghost. I felt nothing for him, not hate, not pity, not even curiosity. He was a stranger who had once lived in my house, a shadow that had passed over the sun and was gone. I, however, came home. My first morning as the true owner, I did not go to the big house. I drove my old, newly repurchased Jeep into town. I went to a small, neat cottage with a rambling vegetable garden out front. Old Joseph opened the door. When he saw me, really saw me, his tough, weathered face, tanned like leather from a lifetime of sun, simply crumpled. Tears welled in his faded blue eyes and tracked through the deep wrinkles. "Maya," he whispered, his voice cracking. "My girl. Is it really you?" And I broke. The dam holding back 2 years of grief, of fury, of lonely determination, burst. I fell into his arms, this man who had taught me how to plant, how to prune, how to listen to the land, and I wept. Great, heaving sobs that shook my whole body. "I'm so sorry, Joseph," I choked out. "I'm so sorry I couldn't stop him. I'm so sorry he let you go." He held me tight, his old arms still strong from a life of work. "Hush now," he murmured into my hair, his own voice thick. "You came back. You came home, that's all that matters, that's everything." He came back to work the next day. We walked the land together, just as we used to when I was a girl trailing after him. We walked in silence for a long time, just feeling the sickness of the soil beneath our feet. We cried for what had been lost. And then, we got to work. The healing was long, slow, and painful. It was harder than my revenge had been. We stopped all the chemical treatments immediately. We tore out the most diseased vines, the ones too far gone to save. It felt like amputating a limb. We brought in flocks of sheep to gently graze the cover crops between the rows, their manure becoming our fertilizer. We started huge compost piles with grape skins, stems, garden waste, and hay. We brought in loads of clean, living soil to help the tired earth remember what it was. We hired back the people who cared. The cellar master Andrew had replaced. The woman who ran the tasting room who remembered my mother. We became a family again, a ragged, wounded family, but a real one. We filled in the dangerous reservoir on the North Slope properly, with a proper engineer we trusted, turning it into a small, safe, spring-fed pond. I wrote one final post on the Unbroken Vine blog. I titled it "The Keeper Has Returned." I posted a simple, joint statement with Mr. Wilkins, confirming that the family matter had been resolved privately, and that I, Maya Thorne, was now the owner and steward of Heritage Song Vineyard. I thanked the community for caring about the truth. Then I took the blog offline. Its work was done. The vineyard recovered slowly, season by patient season. I recovered slower. The cold, focused purpose that had sustained me for 2 years was gone, and in its place was a vast, aching emptiness. I had to learn how to live again, not for revenge, but for love. The deep, quiet, stubborn love for this land that had never, ever died. It was the hardest fight of all. I do not forgive Andrew. I do not think I have it in me. But I no longer carry the weight of him. He is not a ghost in my halls. He is a shadow that passed over the sun, and now the light is back, different perhaps, but real and warm. Tonight, I sit on the porch of the farmhouse. I ripped out the stainless steel and the white marble. I sanded and re-stained the wide, old wooden planks my father had laid. I put back the rocking chair where my mother used to sit. The sun is setting over a leaner's promise, and the vines are finally, truly green again. They will never be what they were, but they are healthy. They are honest. In my hand is a glass of our first true wine in years. We called it Homecoming. It is not a perfect wine. It is a little rough around the edges. It carries the memory of struggle in its taste. But it is clean. It is true. It is full of a fragile, hard-won hope that tastes sweeter than any victory. The court denied me justice, so I crafted my own. It was a hard, lonely, and bitter road. It changed me in ways I am still discovering. It left scars on my soul as deep and permanent as the tractor lines in the earth. But the land is patient. It is the greatest teacher I have ever known. It teaches you that after the longest, coldest winter, the deepest roots still hold. It teaches you that after the sharpest betrayal, if you tend the soil with care, a truer, quieter peace can grow. It teaches you that home is not just a place you inherit. It is a place you fight for, and then, with gentle hands, you heal. My roots are here. They are deep, they are strong, and they are finally at peace. And from them, I am home.